Build Show Live 2024 conference classes are brought to you by Builders FirstSource, Huber Engineered Woods, Pella, and Sashco. This session is sponsored by Polygaurd.
Jake Bruton here for Build Show Live 2024. The Build Show is over. This is a wrap. I want to say thank you to one of our presenting sponsors. It is Huber Engineered Woods. They are the makers of Advantech, X Factor, Zip System, Zip R, all of the accompanying products with that, all the things you know and love, and I think they are a great representation of everything that Build Show Live represents. We're trying to move the industry forward. We're trying to innovate. We are trying to be better at every turn, and I think that's a good representation of what Huber and Build Show are together, and I think it's great that they're a sponsor. They're also a good partner for us at Aero Building. We've been working with them for 20 plus years on the Advantech front, more than a decade on the Zip front. They help us build our energy efficient homes. Their tech support and their sales team are always there when we call, and I can't think of a better partner in this industry when we start talking about systems that allow us to do our job in a better format. So Huber, thank you for your sponsorship. I can't wait till next year.
This is a presentation I've modified here, but I think the important thing to understand is the perspective of this presentation. While it may seem like I'm up here preaching and telling you how to do something I figured out, hell no. This is a whole presentation about a self-kick in the ass, and I'm just going to share it with you. So you can take what you think comes from this, but getting your yard straight before you look over the fence, that's a daily challenge for me. You know, one of the recent occurrences that just happened is my son joined us. He graduated architecture school, came to work with me and Lexi. Lexi graduated architecture school about 4 years ago and came to work with me. Can't lie, both times have been a challenge. When you work for yourself for 25 plus years and you do everything, and now there's somebody in the room with you and and they're saying, well, what do you want me to do? It's like, I don't know. Question is, what do I trust you to do? What do I really want you to do? What is it that I don't want to do? There's a whole bunch of things that come to mind with that, but also working, 30 years plus in the industry, I've come to understand, there's really good builders I love working with. There's some builders I will never work with again. And then there's Jake. Yes, that was a joke. I continue to work with Jake though. But let's get started. We're going to talk a little bit about everything. This is a pretty wide spectrum, and I think it's that way. That way. There we go. Right? Success. It's simple, or it's simple, but it's not easy. Right? One of the things I constantly remind myself is to break it down to the common denominator and say, Steve, what are you really trying to get at here? Right? It is pretty simple when we step back, but man, we're in that rut of every day trying to get drawings out the door, trying to meet with builders, trying to get that permit settled, get all this stuff done, that it tends to really cloud what we need to do. All right? Discipline. It's a self-induced control system of standards. Now, I know a little bit about discipline because when I turned 17 years old, I signed a little piece of paper that said, for 13 weeks, you're going to go through hell, and then for the remaining of the 4 years, you're going to be attached to this system of standards that probably has some of the highest discipline in the world. There you go. Thank you. So, yes, that's me. I only did 4 years. And I'll tell you, leaving was probably one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life because I thoroughly enjoyed the 4 years. And, when you take a snotty-nosed 17-year-old from a very small town in northwestern Massachusetts and you put them in Paris Island, changes get made. They get made extremely quickly. And you come to understand a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the world, a little bit about how things happen, and you know, what my responsibilities are. I don't have the picture, but I had the privilege of attending NCO school I was in Station Camp Pendleton, and the one thing that stays with me for life is on every mirror, and there's probably about 20 of them in the head, that's bathroom for civilian people. When you stand in front of the sink, it says, "You are responsible," across the top of the mirror, right? It's probably one of the things that's lasted with me the most with the Marine Corps. I never forget that. Every morning when I wake up, I look in the mirror and I see that at the top. You're responsible, right? Get your crap in order, right? But I had the privilege. I got to play Marine, drive trucks, got to shoot some pretty cool stuff. But one of the things that probably brought me kind of the most success later in life are the people I got to associate there. So the yes, that guy has 4 stars on his shoulder. So my 4 years in the Marine Corps, about the last 2.5, I got to walk the halls with the highest people in the U.S. military. 4 stars, 3 stars, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General of the United States, Secretary of the Navy. I got to meet them all, drive them, walk down the halls with them, have conversations with them. In fact, the SINCPAC commander, 4-star admiral, who was in charge of the western half of the world, all Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, National Guard, he controlled it all. He answered to the president and chairman of the Joint Chiefs directly. I had the opportunity to play golf with him a couple times. I was very fortunate. My handicap was about a 4 at the time. So he liked good golfers, and but that was a huge success. And again, in that photo, I was probably 20 years old, right? So still a snotty-nosed little guy, but anyways, we moved on. I got out of the Marine Corps, decided let's go to architecture school. So you can see my archaic wall section. Yeah, that was probably drawn in 1990, maybe. Did I have a date on it before I go? And yeah, 12 April 1990. Been drawing for over 44 years. Now we get to draw and design things like the top right photo. We get to do some really cool stuff that kind of makes that somewhat archaic. But one of the things, that I think is a secret to my success is I never forget how I got there, who I met, and I stay in touch. So the picture with the 3 people there, me being one of them, the gentleman behind me with the glasses on was my drafting teacher in high school. I still have dinner with him once or twice a year. And we talk about, he watches all my videos, he reads the articles, I'll send him, a magazine or send him a link every now and then, but we chat rather regularly. But I think it's really important that, to maintain those links for a number of reasons. He wants to understand what his success is also, right? And so by me sharing that information with him, he gets a really quick understanding of who he was and what he did. Set of drawings. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't, but I took 3 projects we're currently working on, did a global grab, and did a count. So 40,000, 52, 68. Those are the number of lines in a drawing set. It's a lot of lines, right? And every line has a reason for being, right? So as an architect, I certainly need to understand what every line means, but as a builder, you're charged with interpreting what every line means. So our success is only achieved if we both understand what all those lines mean, right? One of the things that I always have to remind myself is, yeah, I've been with these drawings for a long time. There's drawing sets that, if you ask me, hey, what's the width on that bedroom? I could probably tell you without referencing the drawings, because I was with them for so long. But we hand those out sometimes, not necessarily to the builder, because we love to get the builder on board early, but sometimes the framer's looking at it for the very first time. So we have to make sure that the right information is there, so that not only am I talking about putting myself in a position to succeed, but I'm trying to put the framer in a position to succeed, and I'm planting that seed. And it's, remember, you are responsible. His success is partially my responsibility to provide the right information for him to do his job successfully. Now, as an architect, some of you might know, one of my favorite things to do is visit the job site. And I know that's crazy for an architect. And believe you me, I can play games with the best of them out there. I walked up to a job site, the concrete guy, foundation guy was there, start leaning on the fence, and I say, hey, how you doing? I said, oh, good. He's staring, and I said, how'd the foundation go? Everything lay out okay? And he said, yeah, it's fine. Gave a couple seconds, he looked up and said, what are you, the framer? And this is where I had to have some fun. No, and I just stared at the foundation. He goes, oh, you must be the plumber. I said, no. And he said, well, are you the excavator? And I said, no. All right, who the F are you? And I said, I'm the architect. He said, really? Why are you here? Right? And architects, we get that a lot. But I can't do my job well if I don't know what everybody's job is out there, right? So I'll climb up on a roof, I'll sit down and I'll talk to the framer. Hey, did everything lay out properly? Was all the information that you needed there, right? How do I provide a set of drawings as an architect, never visit a site and never have a conversation with a concrete guy? How do I know what the hell he needs? Because some other architect that showed me what he needs, that architect probably never visited a job site? No, right? And as a builder, I think it's your responsibility to sit down with the architect, go through the drawings, voice your opinion. Say, hey, I don't think we can really build this way, right? Can you redraw it? Can you do your job? Right? We all manage expectations, whether you believe it or not. That's our number one job. We all do it. And I have a lot of people that are expecting stuff from me. The general contractor, the client, the electrician, the concrete guy, the excavator, the plumber. They all have expectations that I have to manage. That's my job. And if I'm successful, it means they're successful. And if they're successful, they're going to like working with me. And if they like working with me, then I get more work with them. All right? Jake and I have probably done, 20 projects together. Yeah, meet Jake. I didn't make this. Somebody else made it, but I stole it, and I own it now. It's the little Jake puppet. Him and another builder were having a little back and forth fun, where the latest was Jake made a bunch of keychains with the other builder's phone number on it. And as he would go through airports, he would leave them on tables and stuff. So this builder got like 500 phone calls. I found your set of keys, and it took about 20 times before the builder realized what the hell was going on. But he just kept getting calls. And some of them were crazy because he had some woman go into her mom's house and leave it on her dresser. So the mom called the number like, why the hell is this key in my bedroom? And started yelling at the builder. So it was a really good prank. But needless to say, I put this up because it's very important. If you've ever heard Jake speak, without sounding, degrading, but Jake lives in Columbia, Missouri. It's not the largest thriving metropolis in the United States, right? But working with Jake, we've figured out how we can get clients that'll come to Jake and say, I want you to build the building and I want Steve to design it. Now, if we're talking about being successful, wouldn't we all want to not have to go through a bidding process or even a marketing process, right? Who doesn't want builders or homeowners coming to you as a builder and saying, I want you to build my house because I know you're going to do it the right way. I think you're going to do the best job. I'm not going to put this out to bid. I want you to build it. As an architect, we're very fortunate. We get almost an inquiry a day for work through our website. We need to choose one of them a month to sustain life. So that means I have the fortune of dismissing over 25 jobs a month. and saying, I don't think you're the right client, right? And I've actually had one potential client offer to pay me triple. I still turned down the job because it wasn't the right job for us. And he sounded a little wacky. So, but I turned the job down, but he was willing to pay. But it just wasn't the right job. And I didn't think, you know, success is about certainly doing the project well, but for me, there's kind of an internal success. Is our office happy? Is it the right project? Is it exciting? Did it provide the social media aspect that we're looking for? You know, was it the right project? And, you know, I have a good builder friend that I worked in Boston. He just recently retired, turned over this company to his employees. But I've heard Paul often say, you know, I wish I gave a handful of clients $500 to go away. I would have made more money. Right? And there's a lot of truth to that. Because most builders I know, they have at least one or two horror stories about choosing the wrong client, getting in a little too deep, having to bail themselves out. So, you know, the relationship that Jake and I built in, like I said, nowhere, Missouri, Jake doesn't need 20 or 30 houses. He needs 2 clients a year in Columbia that want to build a house. And so we just need those clients to come and say, I want you guys to design it and build it. And then Jake and I turn around and have some fun. But it also, you know, traveling the country, we do work all over the country, pretty much east of the Rockies. And, you know, a lot of times I hear when we're lecturing on building science or at the symposiums, I hear people say, well, Steve, you don't really understand, you know, here in wherever, Oklahoma, you know, we don't do things that way. I'm like, oh, you don't build houses? Building science doesn't exist in Oklahoma? Well, it does, we just don't do things that way. And then I remind them of Jake, right? Jake used to build traditional code-built houses when his dad owned the company, but Jake turned it around. He actually called me up one day, this is how we met, and said, I have a client with a potential passive house. I saw an article you wrote. Can we talk about it? I said, you know, better yet, why don't you just come up and visit? We're working on one on the vineyard. You can come up and we'll go. And he's like, really? It's like, yeah, come on up. And he did. And he brought the client with him. Now, the client went away because the husband we won't go there. But the reality is Jake and I spent like 2 or 3 days together and solidified a relationship that today is thriving, right? But it's because he reached out, we established that relationship, and now we're both onto the path to success, right? What does that mean? It means when we sit down at a table with our clients, they rely on us. I don't let the tail wag the dog, right? The client doesn't come to me and say, Steve, I want to do this. Now, I might review it and say, okay, that's a pretty fair wall assembly. We can tune it to that climate. It's going to work well. But if it doesn't, it's going to be, hey, might I suggest this? Because I don't think your solution is quite there, but let's go through the design process and we'll really weed that out. If they say no, then maybe they're not the right client. But if they're willing to have that discussion, then we'll continue the conversation. But as professionals, it's our job to understand the idea of performance versus cost, right? One of the things I always tell clients, you probably heard me say it before, is good things cost money, right? Don't come to me telling me, oh, I want this 4,000 square foot house and blah, 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 but $300 a square foot or $200 a square foot. You got 2 Mercedes in the driveway. You understand value. So let's have a conversation about value. Let's have a conversation about what it actually costs to build that house, the way it should be built. And if you align with those thoughts, then we'll continue that conversation. But as a professional, it's my job. And it's my job to understand what's that next opportunity, right? If I'm sitting there with a client and they say, hey, Steve, I really love the design of the house, but let's say I threw $20,000 more at the house. What would be the next thing we would do, right? We need to have an answer for that, right? As clients, Matt and I, we align on so much stuff. But there's a fork in our road where Matt tends to go this way and I tend to go that way. And it's with who should the build show cater to? Matt thinks we're all about helping builders build better. And while I agree with that, and while my videos talk about building science, I think that's a great idea. But I take the left turn, or bear left, when we come to those crossroads, and I think Build Show should also target homeowners, right? Because they hold the purse strings. And there's a lot of builders out there that just want to do what homeowners want done. So I want to train homeowners to sit at the table and ask their architect, well, what's your water management strategy on my $2 million house, right? What's the vapor profile across that wall look like? Does it have the ability to dry, right? What's your thermal strategy for my house? How can I ensure little Susie and Johnny are going to stay nice and warm in the winter and have exceptional air quality in our house? What's your strategy to accomplish that? And everybody wants to talk about, oh, the beautiful front elevation and such. But I really want homeowners to talk about that stuff. It's viable stuff to talk about. But I want them to continue that conversation and continue that questioning. Because I think that's the division where we have really good builders and architects that understand, and then we have the others. All right, qualities of a good build. You might have seen this before: health, comfort, and durability. We want to do all these things, but if we concentrate on health, comfort, and durability, we get energy efficiency as a byproduct. When we make the right decisions about health and comfort, energy efficiency comes along for the ride. And I've done some of the most energy efficient buildings in America. Passive houses, passive house zero energy houses, etc. And that always comes along for the ride. So we have to understand, where's our focus? Where's our focus on delivering? You know, energy efficiency, if any of you have built, $1 million plus house, you probably understand that your homeowner really isn't concerned about saving 10% on their energy bill if they're building a $3 million house, right? They're gonna say, Steve, whatever the cost of electricity or gas is, whatever, I want this house though, right? But they understand the health and durability. They don't want mold. They don't want leaky roofs or leaky windows. They don't want to see water stains on the inside of their house. And they certainly don't want to walk from this room where they're sweating into a room where they're freezing, right? So they understand those things. Our job is to find that sweet spot, right? As professionals. How do we get them in that range? Labels. I hate labels. You can get rid of them for all I care. And one of the labels I hate the most is high performance homes, and that's kind of one of the things we specialize in. But I rarely use the term high performance homes. For me, every home is just a series of decisions. Every home has a budget. My job as a professional is to marry their budget with good decisions. That's it. If you want to call it a passive house or LEED Platinum or zero energy, go ahead. That's fine. You can do that. But my job as an architect is to take that budget, marry it with sound decisions, and put the best product on the ground that I can. In my work, I have the privilege of working with some really interesting people. One of the gentlemen that I worked with, we were building a second home that would eventually become his final retirement home and family home. And when I was working with Jay happened to be in charge of entrepreneurship, the College of Entrepreneurship and Innovation for a very prestigious college in New England. And Jay spends his time going around the world when he's not teaching and talking to companies and countries about things like, how do I scale, right? Going down to Brazil and meeting with the people in Brazil who want to double coffee production in the next 10 years. How do we do that? What does that look like to us? This is the guy that provides those kinds of answers. He's a professional in what he does. Now, what he taught me was innovation is a process, not a product. Now, we all see, we can go into the expo and all those manufacturers, they're gonna hate me for this, but they're all gonna say, hey, come see our latest innovation, like it's a product, but it isn't. It's the idea. And when Jay explained it to me, he used Keurig. I'm sure you're all familiar with that, right? Everybody thinks Keurig was, oh, this coffee maker, what a great innovation. No, the idea was how to make it an individual cup of coffee in my house. That was the innovation. Building the machine to do it was the result of the innovation. But planting that seed and that idea was the innovation. When we do a house, we start with a certain amount of knowledge and experience. I think I have a red light here, yeah. We start with a little bit of knowledge and experience. We plan, we build it. Do we validate it? Does everybody do a blower door test on their house? Do you know that you're meeting your intents? Right? Do you ever hose down any of the windows in your house to make sure that they got installed properly? Do you know? And then we start a new project and we relaunch it. But understand, when we start that new project and relaunch it, we're in a different location now because we've gained all of that knowledge, right? So the discipline in terms of the innovation spiral here is that we need to establish a process that we're always moving forward and progressing. That we take the information, the bad things that happened in that last project, or even the good things, and we try and make them a little bit better. I get builders coming up to me all the time. Hey, Steve, I really want to get into doing, some of these houses that you design and get built. Like, how do I do that? It's a very simple process. Pick one or two things. In this house here we're going to build, let's concentrate on air leakage. You always want good water management, so that's a hard one to kind of eliminate. But do a little better on air leakage. You get that house down to 1.5, you say, okay, on the next house, let's strive for 1. You don't have to go for passive house. Just try and bring it a little bit better. And before you know it, you're going to be building very, very good performing homes. And you'll be doing them for a really decent price point, because part of this spiraling oval is figuring out, how do I get that best window installation and what is the most economical way to do that window installation? Fear is a really good one. I like to live in fear. It's scary, it's uncomfortable, but fear is a really good motivator, right? And I learned that, in the Marine Corps, because we were scared shitless pretty much every day we woke up, for at least the first 13 weeks. But but fear, it really does breed some responsibility. And this is a house that we did. Matt came up, we shot a bunch of videos, so you can go watch it on it. We did a pool house and a barn associated with it. But I'll never forget when, the homeowner said, yeah, we want to work with you on this house. And I was like, yeah, 8,000 square foot house on the coast, really good budget, one of the best builders in Boston. It wasn't even 5 minutes. I'm driving home and I was like, holy crap, 8,000 square foot house, one of the best builders in Boston, and a huge budget. We better get our yard straight on this project, right? Because the homeowner looked at me and said, the house that we're in that we tore down, he said, every one of these windows that face the ocean leak. He said, I better never see that in the new house. And I was like, okay. And he was a gentleman that, you saw him, but what you really saw was the 6 lawyers standing behind him, kind of ghost-like figures, right? But fear is a really good motivator, because on this project, not only did I learn a lot from a very good builder and a job super. I would actually go to the job and my daughter would be like, where are you going? I'm like, I'm going up to, this house. And she's like, but you were just up there. I'm like, yeah, but I just feel I want to walk around the house with Brian and just have him talk, because I learned so much from the building manager, the construction manager out on site. Brian is just a wealth of knowledge. And when you have that person available to you, you want to tap into that information, because it's going to make me a better person, right? So, this was the project. Obviously, you can see that's the Atlantic Ocean out there that we have access to. It's a site that, we probably had, at least 18 or 20 different elevations in the foundation system on this house. It went down, up, stepped over here, footings dropped, footings came up. We had a fitness room where she wanted to jump rope, so we dropped it 3 feet deeper into the ground. But it had a whole bunch of things. And yes, It scared the hell out of me because foundation systems, as you know, we get one chance, right, to get it right. And so we did our typical detail there, and you can see here all the different plateaus of that foundation system. But because fear is such a great motivator, I said, you know what, let me take the extra step. I'm going to build a 3D model of the drawing, right? And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to build that foundation before we build that foundation. And I'm going to make sure I thoroughly understand it. Because again, when I look in the mirror in the morning, you are responsible. When Brian calls me, the 3 words I never want to tell Brian is, I don't know, right? It might be, I don't have that answer, I'll go find out. But it's never, I don't know, right? And so I built the whole model of this. I understood where all the steps were, where everything went, transferred all of that information into the foundation plan, and you can see that's a blow up of this, and you can see all of the little different elevation marks. One of the things I learned from a concrete guy years ago was, in my little conversation, he said, hey, can you put diagonals on a foundation plan? I said, yeah, it's kind of, that literally is 2 clicks and stretch the line on. He goes, yeah, whenever you do foundation plans, put that on there. He's like, we could do the math and we could figure it out, but it's great to have those diagonals to check our square on the foundation, because your number's gonna be, I mean, my number's gonna be within a 32nd, because that's what we have our tolerances set up for, right? So we could provide that number. It helps him become more successful because not only is he doing his job, but he can check it against another number to ensure that we're all on the same page. And if he puts in a nice square foundation, guess who looks good in front of Brian? Yeah. So success breeds success. So we put all these numbers, but then I got thinking, I built this model, why don't I help Brian out even further? So I created a whole package of 11 by 17 sheets because I already had the information. I did this so I understood it, but now let me share that information with Brian, and I gave him all of the foundation elevations with all the grades, 25, 25.5, 25.5, those are all dialed into the foundation plan, but it also shows them what's above grade, what's below grade, and what the heights are of each of those grades at the corners above the footing. So guess what Brian did? He absolutely loved it. When he built it, he went over there, measured up 4'3", sprayed green on that corner, snapped the line and sprayed green. So not only is Brian now successful, the waterproofing guy's successful, because how easy of a job is it? 8,000 square foot house, you tell the waterproofing guy, yeah, I just sprayed all the green lines, just go and waterproof to the green line, right? Coordination is spot on in that system. Everybody's successful because I chose to make sure that I knew what the hell was going on in step 1. And then I shared that information with everybody else to ensure success went down the line. And of course, now that that's there, now you just tell the excavator and say, hey, backfill that to about 2-3 inches above the insulation on the outside of the wall. And the excavator's done and happy, right? Everybody that followed me from the drawings is happy because they all fully understood. The concrete guy was immensely thankful. He's like, this is the best foundation I ever put in, and it's one of the most complicated. But it was the easiest because someone took the time to figure it out. Someone took the time to do their job. Oh. You know, I always talk about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. You know, when it comes to drawing, it's knowledge is what do I draw? Wisdom is why do I draw it? I put up this image. So I grabbed this off the internet. This is actually a window company, and this is their detail for install. Now, I don't know if you see it, but I see it. They have really good flashing. They kick it out there. They also have flashing in all of this, and then they put a bead of sealant there. Why would I install flashing and then put an end dam to where I want the water to go out? And like I said, this is a window company talking about how to install their windows, right? So they obviously have some knowledge, but they certainly don't have much for wisdom on what they're doing. Integration and application. A lot of times I hear people say, oh, we'll just wait till that gets framed up and we'll figure that out. You hear those stories with other builders saying, yeah, the architect really didn't give us room for a mechanical room or mechanical space or duct space. This is a small 1,500 square foot house. We put a Zender system in it. The Zender system had 285 linear feet of 3-inch hose. 1,500 square foot house, no basement. That is not a situation where you say, well, let's frame it up and we'll figure out where all 285 feet go, right? That's something that we have to figure out at the beginning, right? So knowledge of what systems we're putting in that house, but also the knowledge of where are these systems going to go. It's an integration process, not an application. It's not something we apply after the fact, because it's not going to happen, right? And the homeowners don't all of a sudden want to see a soffit running down the left side of their family room because you said, hey, we didn't really realize, but there's 8 3-inch hoses we got to get from over there to down there. So we're just going to put a soffit across the room. All right? So we planned this out. We turned that little hallway there into the basement, basically, ran all of everything that had to traverse the building, and then we complemented it with a nice wood ceiling. So we turned it into an architectural effect where it was fully integrated with our mechanical systems. Pre-construction meetings. I do a lot of work. Jim, the guy with the red hat, he's the first builder I ever worked with. Jim and I have been working together, and we just have 2 new projects we're about to start. But we've been working together for right around 30 years. Like I said, very first project. Jim and I never raised our voice at each other. We've never had an argument. We've never even had like a frustrated talk. I mean, Jim's a real gentle guy, but Jim and I are always on the same page. And I'll give credit to Jim. Jim ensures that we're always on the same page. I try to keep up to Jim, but Jim is relentless about, hey, let's just have a quick meeting, let's talk this through. I want to make sure we're on the same page. But then he doesn't have problems. When I show people this, and I say, yeah, Jim brought in all his guys, and we walked through the drawings, I stripped all the notes off, we talked about where's the air barrier, where are the proper flashings that we're going to put in. People say, well, doesn't that cost Jim money? He's got, 4 guys in there for the afternoon, bought him pizza, all of that. Jim's response when I asked him that was, what's the cost to replace 6 windows that were installed wrong? Right? Getting on board and understanding before you do the task is far easier than trying to fix that task gone wrong. Details. For those of you that were here in 301, we talked a little bit about that, but for the longest time, an architect's job, show the components of a wall system. Hey, here's the 2x4, this is the floor frame, this is where it all goes, this is the wall, how it's going to set up, this is where the column is, engineered wood column, whatever the case is, how the siding goes. But in my 30 years, things have certainly migrated to not only do we have to show components, but performance is a major part of what we're illustrating. Where's the air barrier? How are we managing that water? What's the vapor profile across that wall system look like? Does it have the ability to dry in both directions or in one direction? Is there a problem where I have multiple vapor barriers and I'm going to create a diaper? And we call that a diaper. Joe coined it. The reason he calls it a diaper is because you know what happens in a diaper. It gets filled with you know what, right? And it's the same with the wall system. If it can't dry in at least one direction. So my job as an architect is to understand that there's a bunch of performance requirements that are part of that drawing. And builders, you don't get off easy because I might have to know how to draw it. You have to know how to interpret it and how to take that drawing and make it real life. And how do I provide that performance that Steve is talking about in that drawing? Right? Sometimes I do twins. Some builders really like it. There's a couple that I work with, they absolutely love it. So we'll do the detail, we'll put all the notes on, but then I'll just provide them a detail that just has nothing but every dimension available. And he's like, they're certainly smart enough to put that together, but they just like that detail there so their guys can check the number, so that their framer can check the number and make sure that everything is going well. And then from a CAD standpoint, it's freezing a couple layers and offering the dimension layer and turning off the text layer, right? It's not any additional drawing really. It takes me maybe about 5 minutes to develop that drawing. But that's hours worth of potential savings and corrections for the framer and the general contractor, right? If we're talking about performance, and I know the framer is in charge of getting my air barrier correct, then I do a set of twins where I focus on what the air barrier is. Because after all this stuff on the left gets installed, the framer's gone, right? He doesn't have to, the framer doesn't care that there's a crown molding here or there's a beadboard soffit or vent here. He's not putting that in. The siding guy that's coming is putting that in. To the framer, who the hell cares after I leave? But the framer does care about how are we transitioning that air barrier across and into the ceiling? Where do I have beads of sealant, right? That information. So I create twins that are for each of the different disciplines so that they can be put in a position to succeed. Right? Design tent versus build. Now, all of our drawings, if we do trusses, yes, they get sent out, they get engineered, we get tons of shop drawings back, we get to review them, but how many people have ever sent a plans to a truss manufacturer, come back with shop drawings and had no changes? Right? That world doesn't exist. Right? They always come back and it's like, why is this truss 26 feet? The house is 24 feet. Oh yeah, we must have missed that. And I guess you did. Right? So what I like to do, and again, all of this stems from someone has to be in charge of the building. And I'll take that responsibility. Right? Whether it's the truss manufacturer, the framer, the concrete guy, I'll take the responsibility of understanding the build from day one till the end of the project. And then I'll have those conversations in between with all the various disciplines. So my conversation with the truss company is, I do the roof framing plan, I lay this out, but then I call out truss A1, A2, Bs, Cs, and then I'll just do some truss elevations. Now, I'm not engineering the truss. That's not my intent. My intent is to get them to understand that this is what the overhang situation looks like, this is the slope, this is what I intend the height of that to be, and then here's the bearing points of those various trusses, and this is where they lay out in the building. I'm just giving them what my design intent is via a truss elevation. So now they look like even more of a fool when they come back and this truss instead of 24 is 26 feet. I say, I drew the elevation for you. And it says 24 feet. How did we get there? Right? Anatomy of a detail. When we sit down and we talk about what makes a good detail. Well, obviously it has to hold things up. We don't want our buildings falling down. We have to ensure that we can make the proper attachments. How is this going to attach to that, right? What's the performance on that wall section? And then, of course, what are the notes and how do I illustrate or talk about what the performance and what the building metrics are for that detail, right? For me, all details, they should be recognizable, functional, and executable. Right, recognizable. I see so many architects draw details. I'm like, oh my God, why are you trying to reinvent the wheel? Right? One of my favorite Joe quotes is, it's not rocket science, it's building science. Dumb it down as simple as you can get. Right? Some of my drawings, people are like, oh, you shot another video about that detail again? Yeah, that detail works It's recognizable, it's functional, and it's executable, right? Builders understand it, it performs exceptionally well, and they can build it real easy, right? So yeah, we use that detail. Recognizable. At first glance, this might look like a complicated detail, right? It's a timber frame structure, passive house inspired, with a double wall, perfect wall, air barrier, vapor barrier in the middle of the double wall, two 2x4 walls with a, 4 3/8 inch space, a SIPS panel on top of the timber frame that ends with a 2x6 outrigger, and soffit with an over-vented roof assembly on the top. Now that's a bunch of gobbledygook to make it sound like this is a very complicated detail. But when you look at that, there is nothing about this detail that most framers don't do on a regular basis. Yeah, it's 2 walls instead of 1, but it's a 2x4 wall. It's a vented roof, a lot like any vented roof, right? SIPS panels, timber frame, those are the exceptions to it, but all this other stuff, it's fairly recognizable. Functional, right? This is a detail where we do a slab, we put 4 inches of rigid insulation on top of it, 2 layers of Advantech in opposing directions, and basically have an 1.5-inch raft of Advantech that floats on top of that foam. Highly functional. Continuity, which is one of the most favored words in the building science world, this is full continuity. This was from a 3,500 square foot house that had 3,500 square feet of insulation over the slab. But also notice, by doing the 2 layers of Advantech, I was able to pull this one back and create a nice sill pan for my sliders. And so I'm getting water management out of that detail, which makes this detail highly functional, right? Because not only is it solving for the thermal issue here, it's solving for water management issues here. And I fur this out, that band there, and water can just drip down and go out, right? Highly functional detail. And it can be executable, right? This is a 3-piece pour. This is with Jake. They dig a 16-inch trench and they just fill it with concrete. We can't do that in Massachusetts, which is, it's unbelievable. Some places still do it, but we can't use ground for form work. Our code doesn't allow it. But in Jake's, you can go just dig a trench, fill it with concrete, call it a footing. And we do. But this was a house that we had our 4-inch concrete slab and the homeowners wanted it finished. So we had to come up with the details. So we didn't want to lose the financial efficiency of digging the trench. So we dug the trench, and then we had some rebar coming up, and then we poured this curb. But the thing that makes this executable is this 2 inches. When I worked out the detail with Jake, we set that up for 2 inches. Anybody want to take a guess why? If you were listening to us yesterday, you know why, because I showed it. But to put a 2x there, right? So we put a 2x there, and that allows us to form it up. And then when they peel the 2x away, you just simply bury that little ledge in the detail. And then that allows us, to then, come and insulate and pour our slab up to there and get our nice clean slab finish detail. One of the things that I like to do personally is even structural stuff. We draw most of it for a lot of our projects. Occasionally, like Colorado, we have a structural engineer. Down south, we have one. But definitely in Massachusetts, I draw everything up. I send it to my structural engineer. He marks it up, and then I edit my notes on the drawing. Now, one of the benefits that I think of that is because I draw it, I think about it. Right, this is a project that Jake and this is that cantilevered deck system out at the Hilltop Aero project. And the structural engineer sent back his sketches, and he had these 2 7x4x3/8 angles, and he had them welded together. And because I drew it, when I drew it as a single line, I was thinking, okay, there's 2 little round edges. That's gonna hold water. It's gonna eventually rust, and over time, we have a durability issue there. What if we take those 2 angles and spread them apart, right? 3/8 inch steel, well, that's not the same one. 3/8 inch space with plate spacers at 24 inches. So I called the structural engineer and I said, hey, I want to take those two angles, split them, put a 3/8 inch space in there and allow the water to drain there. And he said, yeah, that doesn't really change anything. And that's how we drew it up, and that's in fact how we build it. So now we have that drainable space in between there that's not going to hold water. So Jake and I are providing our clients the very best in solutions and working with our structural engineer. So it's certainly a team effort, right? And it should perform as good as it looks, right? Doing all these drawings so the steel fabricator understands where all of the rods go and cables and how the top is going to attach to it. Basically do your job. And the steel fabricator said, how about if I just build this in my shop and we rent a crane for the morning and we'll just truck it out there on a trailer, lift it, and drop it in place. It was only 8 bolts. They set that whole deck system in about an hour. Right? Sometimes I have an idea. Sometimes they're good, sometimes maybe not so good. But anyways, I had this idea, passive house, slab on grade, we needed a basement. We don't have a basement, so I said, okay, how about if we manufacture an attic, right? We always want to keep our HVAC systems and such on the inside of the building. So, come up with an idea, let's create that manufactured attic. Okay, so let's develop that idea. Translated that idea to the roof railing plan, right? Truss type B. These are different trusses than truss type A. And notice that the highlighted area, it touches every room on the second floor, which is important from an HVAC perspective and from a Zender perspective, because we want to get those ports into every room. So I need to make sure we hit every room. And there you go. Truss A and B, right? We have the manufactured attic there, and on the ends, we don't have the manufactured attic. So now our truss company knows what my intentions are. And then we finalize that detail, and we created this 2-foot attic. And then that 2-foot attic now gets filled up with a whole bunch of HVAC stuff, right? So these ideas, they migrate down, and success breeds success. Right? One house, two lives. We talked about this earlier too. You know, this is a house that I did at Steamboat Springs, Colorado, for a friend of mine. She worked at Building Science Corporation with me there for a long time. And she decided to move out to Colorado. I designed her house, but, you know, understanding where is it that we're designing for and where is it that we're building? Yeah, it's a nice sunny day for about 2 months out of the year in Steamboat Springs. But if you've ever been there, this is life there for the better part of the, half a year or so, 7-8 months. There's a reason why this is a metal corrugated, finish at the bottom. Maybe it has something to do with 4 or 5 feet of snow sitting against the house for 6 or 7 months out of the year, right? Understanding what we're doing so I can tune my decisions to the questions. My first passive house, this was pretty interesting because I met with this client. A builder actually brought me to it, and it wasn't even the builder building the house. It was just a builder I knew. And met the homeowner, and we're sitting there having a meeting. This is 2009. I didn't know what passive house was, but I sat across the table from a guy who said, yeah, so I want to build a passive house. Are you familiar with that? Oh, yeah. And then I excused myself. I was in the bathroom Googling passive house. What is passive house? Oh, okay. So it has an airtightness metric and an energy metric. Comes from Germany. Passive house, FIAS Institute. Okay. Go out and say, oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, passive house, right? It has an energy metric and an airtightness metric, and it comes from Germany. That Katrin brought over. They're out of Chicago. There's a couple built there, and at the time in 2009, there was I think only 2 passive houses, and both were by Katrin in Champaign, Illinois. And but anyways, he hired me, and then I looked at the builder. I said, "Man, we got a lot to figure out. because we have to get this house under 0.60 and under the energy metric. But you know, that's that whole fear as a motivator. Unfortunately, I'm not afraid to say, yeah, I could figure that out. And then on the drive home, I was like, what did I get myself into? Because I just made a promise that I hope I can keep. All right, another project. This was a passive house, but Farley, who was the builder on this is on Martha's Vineyard, and Farley is the owner and the builder of this, and he wanted to build, he's like, I want to build my real passive house, but before I do that, we have the ability to build a accessory structure that's limited to 800 square feet on the site. So he said, why don't we build a test project on the 800 feet, and we'll learn all those lessons, and then they'll migrate into the larger house. And I said, sure. I said, how do they measure the 800 feet? He said, I don't know. I said, okay. We set up a meeting with the building inspector, marched in there and said, hey, you have this metric here where you're limited to 800 square feet. How do you measure that? The building inspector looked at me like I was a ghost, right? Like, what do you mean? I said, this is your damn rule, and you are in charge of enforcing it. How are you going to enforce it? He goes, I don't know. We've never really been asked that question before, which was a really great answer, because now he turned the tables on me so I could provide the answer. And I said, how about if we just use the outside of the foundation, and if we're under 800 square feet, you'll be satisfied? And he said, sure, I'll go with that. So I walked out the door and I said, Farley, we just have to figure out a way to build an R70 wall outside of the foundation and hang it. So we hung 14-inch floor trusses on the outside of the building and basically put a heavily insulated sweater around the building. Another passive house, this one we actually took to zero energy. So that was upon completion. Notice no PV panels, but we since have put them on there. Dan Roy, I've talked about him. He has the best retirement plan in America. He's a retired engineer, lives in a passive house, has superb air quality, energy efficiency. His 2,650 square foot house costs him about, before we did PV, was about $90 a month for full operation. Heating, cooling, hot water, cooking, plug load, all of that. $90 worth of electricity a month. We then put on his PV system that cost $34,000, but after rebates, we're down to $22,000. In Massachusetts, we have solar renewable energy credits. Those totaled to about $9,700. Avoided electric bills, $1,000 for him. Some transfers. He's paid over $2,000 of his sister-in-law's electric bill with his PV system. In Massachusetts, the utility companies are required to allow deferment. If I make more electricity than I use, I can start paying my neighbor's bill with the excess that I create. So he defers that to his sister-in-law who lives on the same grid. And so that's where that $2,000 is. So after all of those, it ends up costing him about $1,000. The system was in place for about 5 years, totally paid for itself in 4.5 years. At year 10, and we're probably at year 12-ish now, but Dan's made over $30,000 in year 10 on that house. And he lives in a passive house with superb energy efficiency and air quality, and he's getting paid basically to live there. And oh, by the way, he actually runs 2 cars on his house and drives around basically on those. So like I said, best retirement plan I know of, because Dan pretty much gets paid to exist. As long as the sun comes up on his house, 57% of his heating requirements for the house is the sun rising, gets paid for. So he only has to come up with 43% of what his heating bill is to create success. Another one, this was Rhode Island's first passive house. The homeowner was so excited, he sent me his electric bill. Yes, it says $0. And that was his first bill. Guess what his 100th bill says? $0. Guess what every bill said? $0. Craig never pays anything to National Grid. In fact, National Grid pays him to live in that house. right? And even if you have flat roofs, we've taken flat roofs, we put low profile systems on there. We charge cars on those. We have battery systems in the basement for backup. $0. They never pay any energy bills, and they get to drive around town and go to work on their house. And, you know, occasionally I threw this one in because it's not always about energy efficiency. We get some really cool projects. We get to sometimes design the furniture going in there. Little vanity that I'm very proud of. I think it looks really cool. So we get to do the cool stuff too. All right, that's Farley's house. That's that 800 square foot house with the trusses on the outside. You know, should look as good as it performs. That's passive house quality and performance, and I think it looks pretty good. Right? Doesn't have to be a tool shed just because we made it energy efficient. So let's talk a little bit about how I got up on the stage. One of the things I love to do, and I never pass up, I love to go out and see where things are going. I'm sure you guys have seen videos of me going to New Wool or Roseburg, seeing logs get cut, seeing insulation get made, traveling with Peter Yost, and I love listening to the conversations, especially when he's in the lab talking to the lab techs and asking them questions. It's a priceless conversation to listen in on, right? Getting that information out there. Is everybody here on social media? Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you you have to go on it, but I am going to tell you that it's a huge boost. If you want people to know who you are as a builder and how great of a job you're doing, where do you think they get that information? Right? If you post something and somebody says, oh, wow, that's a great detail. Wow, that looks awesome. Oh, that looks beautiful. Homeowners start to take notice. And I ask a lot of my clients. I have CEOs of very large corporations, owners of very large corporations that follow me on Instagram and LinkedIn. You don't think it is because it's some obscure, you know, scribble of a handle. It certainly doesn't say CEO of, you know, such and such, but they're out there watching. And if you want to build those caliber of houses, you have to get out to the people that are trying to figure out, hey, who's a really good builder? Who's a good architect? Who's somebody that's aligning with my thinking? You need to put that information out there. Instagram, LinkedIn, I put it out there. There's a lot of like CEOs when I ask them, oh yeah, I follow you on LinkedIn, and then I go watch your videos. Of course, the Build Show and YouTube, we have a YouTube channel. People go there and watch. And you know, Build Show, I'll leave you with this one. Right? When you think about, okay, social media, Steve, yeah, okay, maybe it does something. Anybody want to guess how many views I get a month on my Build Show videos? Because we get the metrics back. Get about 300,000 views a month on my videos. Right? What's that translate to? 10,000 a day? Is that right? Yeah. 10,000 people are watching my videos every day. Right? Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. But the reality is the world is watching. You need to give them something to watch. If you're successful and you want to be more successful, you have to put that success out there for them to see it and for them to appreciate it, and then they'll call you. And then you're starting to be like Jake. People are calling you saying, I want you to build my house. It's not up for bid. It's not up for discussion. Tell me what we need to do to get you to build this house. And thank you. Any questions, thoughts, comments, anything? We good? We're good. Go ahead. No, I tell them I work all over the country. So just like anything, I manage those expectations that my insurance company knows what I do. They also know that like 40% of my revenue is giving lectures, doing videos, and doing stuff. So we get to compromise my insurance fee based on how much work I do architecturally versus how much I don't. All right, well, thank you all for coming. You have a question?
Well, you said you got the red flags. I'm sure you developed red flags on clients to avoid. What are some of them?
I mean, so what are some of the red flags to avoid? I always call for the husband and wife to be in a meeting, and if one of them doesn't show up, that's a red flag. You're building a $3 million house, you can't show up for a meeting with me? No. Are you late for the meeting? Are you too busy doing something else to show up for that meeting? Do you need to reschedule that meeting? How much of a priority is this $3 million house, or $1 million house, or $400,000 addition? We had one client that turned into a total wacko, and when we were, and this was a project with Jake and I warned Jake, I said, there's something about this guy, he wouldn't put his video on the Zoom call. He would only put his mic on. And it's okay, I mean, I get it, but when somebody does things that are kind of out of the ordinary, it's not that he was a bad person, he was a person that just had a different perspective, and for whatever reason had to stay hidden and this and that, and then that turned into, he was quite the problem later on. And I mean, that's a red flag, but the big one is getting people to show up, and are they as responsive as they need to be as a client? We're doing something really important. I had one client, you know, the words you don't want to hear as an architect is, I think I'm going to GC this house myself, right? He went through 3 framers. The second framer walked off the job and said, don't even pay me, Pete. Just don't call me ever again. And he got in his truck and drove away. But he showed up at the first meeting, and when he said, I think I'm going to GC this myself, it was me, him, and his wife. And I said, Pete, no disrespect. Today's meeting, you rescheduled 3 times. You showed up 30 minutes late. That's 1 meeting this week with me. How are you going to manage this project when every day you're going to be required to have 8 or 9 meetings? His wife smacked him on the shoulder and went into a total rant. I told you, I agreed with Steve. She just went out. I was like, it was like lighting a rocket ship, right? And she went off on Pete, but Pete didn't listen. Pete kept his way. It was a horrific project. I would show up and be like, Pete, we have to tear all of that furring off, right? I have a presentation of some do's and don'ts. A lot of the don'ts are from his project. And it's because he doesn't listen, he wouldn't show up, and he's not there to have a meeting. He can't be the general contractor, right? So that's a challenge for them. But, you know, I try and give people as much respect, be there on time, show up, do my job, be responsible, but I also demand it of every one of my clients. And if they're not, I will remind them, right? Hey, you know, the last couple of meetings you showed up late. Tune your clock, do whatever you have to do, but my time is as valuable as yours. So I would appreciate you being on time. All right, well, enjoy Build Show Live. It's a pretty incredible show. Thank you.
It's been a great week here at Build Show Live in Austin 2024. I want to thank one of our project underwriters, Polygaurd, who is providing this content from our classes, which were amazing in client management, building durability, and building science, where Polygaurd has been a leader in air and water management for a long time. We've used a lot of their below-grade water management solutions, but they brought out some great new stuff from their termite prevention to their air control products. Polygaurd's been solving things for builders for a really long time, and we're grateful that they're still working to make our lives easier every day. Thank you to Polygaurd, and thank you for your continued support of our educational content.